There's a question that gets asked periodically, and Hex asked it. How much did you guys charge when you were first starting, and how fast / often did it go up? I'll give a couple of thoughts and then maybe you can do it. I mean, the reality is most of the things I did starting out, the charge was zero because I was just making the best stuff I could with the people around me and none of us had any money. And then if and when, okay, episode 36 and 37 for loudness. Thank you. And if and when things made money, then you deal with it as you go. I think the first time I charged $10 an hour in my parents' basement to some local thing. And then I moved it up to 15 and I was making serious money at age 15 or something like that at $15 an hour. But, you know, these things are, these questions are hard to answer because it depends on exactly what your role is. It depends what your relationship is with people. So much of this, even, and we've talked about this a bit before because we did a couple hours on business. Even today, I mean, it's different for a bit different for you because you essentially do one role over and over and over. You have a rate. You do some things pro bono, but you have a rate. And maybe occasionally if you do a whole album, there'll be a discount, but you pretty much have a rate. But for me, I do so many different roles, from writing and producing from scratch to finishing co-production to mixing to executive producing. And so my deals, I have like a rate that is like, here's the major label rate if you want me to produce and mix a song. But there's always some combination of roles that gets negotiated, and sometimes it's less money and more points, and you know, it changes dramatically. So I think the one thing I would say is what has always upped my rate throughout my career, and I imagine this is the same for you, is when you make really good work that other people love, all of a sudden you're more in demand. And then that's when you say, okay, in order to do all this, you know, you don't generally want to start out with people who have no money and you make stuff and then all of a sudden be like, the next project is twice as much just because. But if you start having serious success and you have, and whether that's you make the best local records or whether you get your first thing that streams a few million or whatever, you know, these benchmarks, when other people respond to your work, and whether that's fans or peers, that's generally when you can sort of solidify and up rates. I don't know, you got thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's also on that side of it, there's an analog in wine, right? Like there's wine gets more expensive based on demand and people writing about the fact that this wine is the best wine. And then there's supply issues. You know, a great producer of wine, like a great producer of music, will bottle less bottles per year just to make sure the quality is even throughout. Timbaland doesn't do hundreds of songs a year. He might do 2 albums in his prime during that year. And those albums in the 90s and early 2000s were some of the best records to ever come out because he spent his time doing it. So based on the amount of time you're engaging in the process, that's warranted of a higher rate because of higher time investment, cost investment, points. Like that's when you're getting to that level of being sought after and, you know, booked almost every day and in demand and everyone wants to work with you. But before that, it's mostly free.
What has your trajectory been with mixing and charging for mixes and that sort of thing? Can you think of the benchmarks when I'm sure that when you get nominated for a Grammy and you have a hit song, your rate goes up some amount, but like,
so start from the beginning. Benchmarks? The beginning was all free in my garage doing local bands. And then when I built a studio with my dad when I was 19 in Long Island, for those 5 years, we had a day rate. The day rate included me. So I was probably making the equivalent of 50 cents or negative money per hour. I was actually working.
So this is engineering, not just mixing, but
engineering,
house engineer.
House engineer. And then when everyone was like, oh, this is done. Like, and I would say, no, who's mixing? They would say, wait, aren't you going to mix? I was like, I don't know. I'm not a mix engineer. I don't know how to mix. Like, no way. They're like, oh, well, we don't have any more money. So then I would spend hours and hours and I would learn how to mix. So I learned how to mix based on necessity because no one had the budget to spend more than whatever my day rate was, which was probably $500 a day, which means I probably made $20 of that. My dad would like throw me.
So the studio was $500, but it was a family business type thing.
Yeah. So like just my dad would just throw me cash now and then to like go eat Mamoon's falafels in Manhattan. You know, I didn't really like spend any money on anything but food. So, I mean, yeah. And at that time they were $250. Now they're up to $450, which is hilarious. So, you know, just throwing me cash here and there, but I never got like handed a wad where like, this is amazing.
When did you start actually being like, I have a per song?
Never on Long Island. Never. That didn't happen until I got to LA and started working with Tony. Tony came up with a fee after we've heard the Tony story. It's on some episode how I met him and how he asked me to move in across the hall.
How Matt and John met their mentors, I think is the name of the clip or something like that. You can find it on the Clips channel.
Yeah. So, YouTube. After he said, move in across the hall, I was like, dude, I can't afford that and my apartment in LA with the work I got. He's like, don't worry. Like I'll get you work. And then we came up with a rate that made sense for him to have me, start mixes, whether I was just starting.
Do you remember what it was? I don't know if you can say it.
I don't think I should disclose that.
That's fine, because it's Tony's business. So yeah, I understand.
It was around $1,000 a mix.
Okay.
Around that, give or take a few hundred, either direction, depending on the
and these are
budget
basically
that was coming in.
Tony's being hired to mix, and you do a lot of the heavy lifting, setting up, starting the mix, getting it to a place where it.
Yes, and then the mixes that were coming solely on my own, I was charging between $500 and $1,000 for those mixes at that point, based on the fact that I felt like I had some sort of cosign from Tony.
Oh yeah, you're working under Tony. You're a young guy. Yeah.
Yes. So I would do that. And then 5 years working with him and then moving downtown. That was right after. And again, this story exists on another episode, mixing Macklemore and Ryan Lewis's sophomore album by myself. It was the first time I did a bigger album with a hit song on it.
Downtown was on that record.
Downtown was on that. And it was the first time I did a song without a whole album without Tony. It was just my name on it. And I charged, I think I charged $2,000 a mix for that at that point, $1,500 or $2,000 for that. And then I felt like, all right, that's a good rate for a while. And then that's where I landed there for a bunch of years and then jumped to the Khalid thing. And then my rate went up from there. And it is about the same, give or take, when there's a deal for a full album. And now with Atmos involved, when we're doing the Atmos mix as well, like I'm just open to negotiating more, but there is a flat rate for one song, including a studio fee that will help cover my assistant and my costs and the time for all the recalls that we have to do. And but it's a flat fee.
Sounds good. So just a quick summation. It really is about, whatever kind of signposts happen, whatever markers happen in your career where like, you move from Long Island to work under a big mixer, work with a big mixer. The perception is you're a young guy coming up under Tony Maserati. Oh, you charge a certain
I have more
amount.
Perceived value, right? It's all perception.
Exactly. Totally.
And it's
so
all
it's like,
self.
Yeah.
I should say, because your summation is going to be great, but let me just add a couple of things before that, which is these are self-imposed. These are with your manager. If you have a manager, these conversations of, is it time to do this? So, okay, I have a Grammy nom and a top 5 record. Well, maybe I can start being a bit more firm at that, be a little bit less negotiable and stay there. So every A&R or manager or team now knows that like, this is the bottom now. There's a new bottom. So we kind of talk, about bottoms mostly. And then that's a decision that is made amongst the team consensus and self-imposed. And then we see where it lands in the reception of it, right?
So things like cosigns where you're working with some bigger people, whether it's artists or whether it's you're working under a big producer. I mean, I had that with Eric Valentine a bit, where I was getting hired for things, and I had made records that people liked and had a few bands get signed, but because I was Eric Valentine's guy, or that was the perception, there were people that were willing to pay me a third or a quarter or a tenth of what he gets in order, which for me was a huge amount of money to produce major label records. So things like cosigns, things like just having great work. I mean, really, we say this over and over, and we'll get to it. This will segue into another question. Doing great work is far and away the most important thing for all of your business, for all of your success, for all of, you want to collaborate with people. The number one thing that gets all of us work is our work. And of course, there's a bit of the catch-22, which is you don't get an opportunity to work with big artists until you have songs with big artists. But the big thing is if you make great records and people really love them, people will seek you out, because the big artists don't all want to work with all the people that work with the big artists, because there's a handful of people that at any given time are the it people. And a lot of labels will put them onto projects, and a lot of artists will do the pop artists will do the rounds with the like 5 or 6 different groups of people that are making a lot of the hit records. But a lot of artists are like, I don't want to work with the same people because I don't want my records to sound the same. Who's doing the new interesting stuff that maybe isn't selling a lot, but there's a cool little scene? I mean, right now I'm obsessed with Dylan Brady and 100 Gex and that whole scene, hyperpop. I love this duo, the Frost Children, Aaron Cartier. Like, that's my favorite stuff right now. And it's not selling a lot of records. It's not charting on the radio, but sonically, it's the most interesting stuff happening. It's been happening for a few years, and it's iterated from PC Music, who are a bunch of friends of mine, A.G. Cook and Denny Harl and Finn Keen. It was Easy Fun. There's a bunch of cool stuff happening there, but they're not necessarily the ones that are making hit records. But I guarantee you, 100 Gex played a show in LA, and you see like Benny Blanco posting from the show, and you see Diplo posting from the show. The people that are excited about what's new will find you if you're making the interesting stuff.
Right.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. We don't have sponsors. We don't run ads. We don't have a Patreon. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks.